The battle raged on across the desolate planet. The sounds of gunfire and explosions echoed in the air, a constant reminder of the chaos that had consumed this once peaceful world. The human Marines had been fighting here for weeks, but Alex was tired. Tired of the endless fighting, tired of seeing his comrades fall, tired of the constant struggle to survive. He had always believed in the mission, but now the lines between right and wrong were beginning to blur. Alex crouched low behind a pile of rubble, his eyes scanning the horizon. The enemy was nearby, but he needed a moment to breathe. The scorching sun beat down on his back, and sweat dripped into his eyes. He wiped it away with the back of his hand, his grip tightening on his rifle. The war seemed endless, and in the midst of it all, he had lost sight of why he was even fighting. As he shifted his position, Alex's eyes caught something unusual. In the distance, barely visible through the haze of smoke, there was a figure lying motionless on the ground. At first, Alex thought it might be one of his fallen comrades, but as he moved closer, he realized it was something far more dangerous, a wounded alien warrior. She was unlike anything Alex had ever seen. Her skin was a deep shade of purple. Her body tall and muscular, with intricate markings running across her arms and face. Her armor was battered and torn, evidence of a fierce battle. She had clearly been left for dead, her legs broken and barely clinging to life. Alex hesitated for a moment, his heart pounding in his chest. She was an enemy, one of the alien forces they had been fighting for so long. But as he watched her struggle for breath, something inside him stirred a sense of compassion he hadn't felt in a long time. Why would they leave her like this? Alex muttered under his breath. He had never seen an enemy warrior abandoned before. The aliens were ruthless, but they always fought to the end. This didn't make sense. Without thinking, Alex moved closer. The alien's eyes fluttered open for a brief moment, her gaze locking with his. Her eyes were fierce, full of defiance. But there was something else there, too: pain, exhaustion, and the faintest glimmer of fear. She tried to lift her arm, but her body was too weak. Blood oozed from her wounds, staining the ground beneath her. Alex's mind raced. Should he leave her? Should he end her suffering? The mission was clear: eliminate the enemy. But Alex had always been taught to follow orders, not his instincts. And his instincts told him something was wrong here. Her breath was shallow now, her chest rising and falling with great difficulty. Alex knelt beside her, his rifle still in his hands, but lowered. He glanced around quickly to make sure no one was watching. He could hear the distant sounds of gunfire. The battle still raging on, but for now it was just the two of them, an enemy warrior and a human soldier. "Hey," Alex said softly, his voice unsure. "I don't know if you can understand me, but I'm not going to hurt you." The words felt strange coming from his mouth. He had been trained to fight these aliens, not talk to them. But something about the situation felt wrong. The alien's eyes flickered again, and she weakly raised her hand toward him. There was no anger in her gaze now, only a kind of resignation. She knew she was dying, but still, there was defiance. Alex felt a pang of guilt. She was an enemy, but she was also a living being. "Hold on," he muttered, his voice thick with emotion. He wasn't sure why he was doing this. He wasn't sure why he cared, but he couldn't leave her to die alone. He had seen enough death in this war. It had taken everything from him. But this felt different. He reached out, his fingers trembling slightly as he touched her arm. It was warm, but there was no strength left in her. Her muscles barely responded to his touch. She was dying, and Alex knew it. He had seen enough to recognize the signs. But maybe, just maybe, he could help her. "Stay with me," Alex said, more to himself than to her. "I'll get you out of here, I promise." The alien's lips parted, and for a moment, Alex thought she might speak. But instead, she let out a raspy breath and closed her eyes again. Her body was weakening, and Alex could see the life slowly slipping. Away from her, Alex's mind raced. He knew the risks. Helping an enemy soldier was a dangerous move. If anyone found out what he was doing, it could cost him everything. But he couldn't let her die like this. Not like this. With a deep breath, Alex made his decision. He couldn't leave her to die. He couldn't live with himself if he did. His mission could wait. For now, he had to help her. He gently lifted her into his arms, her broken body a heavy burden. The alien warrior was much taller and heavier than him, but Alex was determined. He began to move, slowly and carefully, trying to stay out of sight. Every step was a struggle, but he couldn't stop now. He had made a promise. The sounds of war were distant now, replaced by the rhythmic thud of his boots on the cracked earth. Alex's heart was pounding in his chest, not just from the physical exertion, but from the fear of what would happen next. He was crossing a line, one that might never be forgiven. But in that moment, all that mattered was getting this warrior to safety. The dusty landscape stretched out before Alex as he carried the alien warrior, Isora, in his arms. Every step felt heavier than the last, the weight of her broken body a constant reminder of the risks he was taking. The wind howled through the ruins, the only sound besides the distant echoes of battle. The war was still raging around them, but Alex couldn't afford to think about that right now. All that mattered was getting her to safety. He stumbled through the ruins, his rifle slung across his back, his hands shaking with the effort of holding Isara. Her body was cold against his, her skin rough and worn from the battle she had just fought. The wound on her legs was deep, and every time Alex shifted her position, she winced in pain. Her breathing was shallow, each exhale ragged and weak. As they moved deeper into the ruins, Alex knew they were getting closer to an abandoned military outpost. It wasn't ideal, but it was the only place he could think of where they might have a chance to survive, at least. He had no medical training, no idea how to treat the severe injuries she had suffered, but he wasn't about to give up. Not when she had been left to die alone. Not when she had shown so much strength despite everything. His mind kept going back to the moment he had found her. The alien warrior had been abandoned by her own people, left to bleed out in the desert. Was she not valuable to them? Was she not worth saving? Alex couldn't understand it. She was a warrior, a fierce fighter. Yet her own kind had discarded her as if she were nothing. It didn't make sense. He thought about what would have happened. If he had left her, the battle would have continued. The war would have gone on. But the thought of leaving her to die alone, to suffer without help, was too much. She wasn't just an enemy. She was a person, just like him. Isra's eyes flickered open again, her gaze barely focusing. She tried to speak, her voice, mere whisper, but the words were lost in the wind. Alex slowed down, shifting her gently in his arms so that she was more comfortable. Her breath hitched as she tried to move, but she was too weak to do anything more than make small, pained noises. Alex whispered, glancing down at her. Save your strength. We're almost there. The words felt hollow to him. He wasn't sure if they were almost there or if he was just lying to himself. Every step felt like it could be their last, and Alex was scared. He was scared of losing her, but he was also scared of what might happen when they reached the outpost. What if the humans there didn't understand? What if they saw her as a threat, as an enemy who needed to be eliminated. He couldn't let that happen. Not after everything he had already done. Minutes passed like hours, and the ruins began to take on a more familiar shape. Alex had been here before, though it had been months since he last set foot in this outpost. The walls were broken and crumbling, the doors hanging loosely on their hinges. It was a ghost town now, a place that had once been bustling with activity, but now only held the echoes of lost time. With a sigh of relief, Alex reached the entrance. He kicked the door open with a grunt, the metal creaking in protest. Inside, the air was still and stale, a faint smell of decay lingering in the corners. He carried Izora inside, carefully setting her down on a dusty cot in the corner of the room. He quickly rummaged through the small supply stash, his fingers trembling as he found some medical supplies. There were bandages, antiseptic, and even some basic painkillers, but nothing that could fix the severity of her injuries. The wound on her legs was the worst of it, deep and raw, as if something had torn through her flesh. It was a miracle she was still alive. Alex wasn't a doctor, but he had learned some basic first aid during his training. He cleaned the wound as best as he could, doing his best not to cause her more pain. She didn't make a sound, but Alex could see the way her body tensed with each touch. He didn't know how much more she could take. After a while, he sat beside her, his back against the wall, his eyes locked on her unconscious form. He was exhausted physically, mentally, emotionally. The weight of the situation was starting to settle on him. He had taken a risk, a huge one, and he had no idea if it would pay off. Would she live? Would he even survive if the others found out what he had done? As the hours ticked by, Alex fought to stay awake. The sounds of war were still present outside, but here, in the silence of the abandoned outpost, he tried to push everything else out of his mind. For the first time in a long while, he allowed himself to rest, though his thoughts kept drifting back to Asara. She was no longer an enemy. She was a person. And in that moment, Alex realized that no matter what happened next, he had made the right choice. Suddenly, Izara stirred. Her eyes opened slowly, and she looked around the room, her gaze locking onto Alex. There was a flicker of recognition in her eyes. She remembered him. And for the first time since he had found her, Alex saw something other than pain in her expression. "Thank you," she whispered, her voice barely audible. But the words hit him like a wave. Alex just nodded, not trusting his voice. He didn't know what to say. All he knew was that he had given her a fighting chance. And now, they would both fight together. The moonlight filtered through the broken windows of the outpost, casting long shadows on the floor. The air was thick with dust, a testament to the time this place had spent abandoned. Alex sat across from Isara, who was now awake and alert, though her body was still weak. Her breathing had steadied, and though her injuries were far from healed, she seemed more stable. Alex couldn't help but glance at her now and then. He had never been this close to an alien warrior before. Everything about her, the way she carried herself, even in her weakened state, spoke of years of battle and survival. Her purple skin, the intricate markings across her body, and the fierce look in her eyes were enough to strike fear into any soldier. But now, sitting in the cold light of the outpost, she seemed ... different. Vulnerable, a side of her Alex had never imagined. "How do you feel?" Alex asked, his voice breaking the silence. Izora gave him a look that was hard to read, but she managed a weak smile. "Better," she replied, her voice hoarse. "Though I've been in worse situations." Alex chuckled softly, though it lacked any real humor. "I'm sure you have, but you were left for dead out there. I wasn't sure you'd make it." Her eyes narrowed slightly. You made the right choice, bringing me here, human. I may be from a different world, but I will not forget your kindness. She paused, taking in a shallow breath. But you must know, my people do not abandon their own. Alex nodded, understanding the unspoken truth. Izara was from a race of warriors who valued honor above all else. To be left behind like she had been must have been a deep betrayal. He couldn't imagine what it felt like, but the look in her eyes told him it had hurt her more than any physical wound could. I did what I thought was right, Alex said, though his words didn't feel strong enough. He wasn't sure what to say to someone who had been betrayed by her own people, yet here she was, still alive because of him. He couldn't shake the feeling that something was about to change between them, something that neither of them could control. Hours passed, and the silence between them grew. Alex sat against the wall, his mind racing as he watched Izara rest. She was in no condition to move, but the time for rest was quickly running out. He had no way of knowing when the enemy would come looking for her, or for him. He was supposed to be on a mission, and that mission had been long forgotten in the wake of his decision to save her. The world outside was still at war, but now, Alex had a new responsibility, one that wasn't just about survival anymore. 'Twas about making sure she lived. And yet, Alex couldn't shake the fear that they didn't have much time. What's the plan? Izara asked, her voice cutting through his thoughts. Her question startled him. He hadn't even realized she was fully awake, but now that she was, the reality of their situation set in. There was no easy way out. He had no idea where reinforcements were, no way to contact anyone for help. They were stranded alone in a war zone, with little more than their wits and the will to survive. I don't know, Alex admitted, rubbing his face tiredly. We're stuck here. The only way out is through enemy lines, and we can't just walk out of here unscathed. He paused, trying to think. The silence stretched between them, thick with uncertainty. Izara sat up slightly, wincing as she moved. Her legs were badly injured, and the pain from her wounds was clear in her expression. But despite the pain, she didn't hesitate to speak. If we stay here, we'll die, she said, her voice steady. I don't care if you're human or alien. You didn't save me just to let me die. Alex looked at her, surprised by the fierceness in her words. Despite everything she had been through, despite her injuries, she was still fighting. And that was something Alex respected more than anything. We need to move. Then, Alex said, a plan beginning to form in his mind. But we can't go back to the front lines. It's too dangerous. There's a remote communications station about 5 miles north of here. If we can get there, we might be able to call for backup. Izara looked at him, her eyes narrowed, calculating. 5 miles. She seemed to scoff, though her voice was still hoarse. That's nothing for a warrior. But you're right, it is a risk. She paused, but I'll take it. I've survived worse. Alex nodded, feeling a surge of determination. He couldn't afford to waste any more time. If they stayed here much longer, the enemy would surely find them. It wasn't just the risk of being discovered that worried him. It was the fact that he had no idea how long Izara could hold out. Her injuries were bad. Even if she had the will to fight, her body wasn't strong enough to keep going for long. We'll leave at first light, Alex said, standing up and stretching his stiff limbs. I'll need to carry you. You won't make it on your own. Izara didn't argue. Instead, she gave a slow nod, her expression unreadable. Fine, but don't think I'll be a burden. I'm not worried about that, Alex replied with a small smile. Just focus on staying alive. They spent the rest of the night preparing. Alex gathered what supplies they had: some water, a few ration packs, and a medkit he'd found earlier. He checked his rifle, ensuring it was fully loaded. There would be no room for error. If they were going to make it to that station, they would need to be quick and quiet as the first light of dawn broke through the cracks in the walls. Alex lifted Izara into his arms once more. This time, she didn't resist. Her face was set with determination, and Alex could see that she was ready. He couldn't afford to doubt himself now. With a final look at the outpost, he began to move, Izara in his arms, knowing that the next step they took could very well be their last. But he was ready to face whatever came next. Together, the first light of dawn illuminated the broken landscape as Alex and Asora moved through the rubble of the outpost, making their way toward the communication station. The sun hung low on the horizon, casting long shadows over the war-torn terrain. Every step Alex took was calculated, each movement slow but deliberate, as he carefully carried the wounded alien warrior in his arms. Izara, despite her severe injuries, was quiet. Her face was set, her jaw clenched, but her eyes showed a fire that couldn't be extinguished. A fierce will to survive that Alex couldn't ignore. The journey ahead of them was uncertain. But one thing was clear: if they didn't make it to that station, they would be trapped, surrounded by enemy forces who were closing in on their location. Alex could hear distant explosions, the sound of battle raging as the war consumed everything around them. His thoughts raced as he tried to keep focus, but the constant fear of discovery gnawed at him. "We need to keep moving," Alex muttered, his breath coming in short bursts. The weight of Izra's body was beginning to take its toll, but he couldn't stop now. Not when they were so close. Izra's eyes flickered up to him, and she spoke in a low voice, barely audible. "I know. I can't keep slowing you down. You've done more than enough." Alex shook his head, his grip tightening on her as he moved forward. "You're not slowing me down. We're in this together." She gave him a tired but appreciative look, and for a brief moment they shared an understanding, a silent agreement that, despite their differences, they would fight through this together. The path to the communications station was not easy. The terrain was uneven, the landscape littered with remnants of the war, burned-out vehicles, craters from explosions, and twisted metal that seemed to scream of the destruction that had taken place. Every corner felt like a potential danger, and every sound seemed to draw them deeper into the crosshairs of the enemy. Alex kept his senses sharp, his rifle ready in case they were ambushed. The silence around them was oppressive, almost suffocating. He had no idea where the enemy was, but he knew they couldn't be far. They were being hunted, and they didn't have much time. As they approached a narrow alleyway between two ruined buildings, Alex's instincts screamed at him to stop. He froze, listening intently. He could hear the faintest sound of boots crunching on gravel, and then shouting. Voices. Enemy soldiers were nearby, and they were getting closer. "Get down," Alex hissed, dropping to one knee and pulling Izara behind a pile of debris. His heart pounded in his chest as he tried to stay as still as possible. Izara, despite her injuries, pressed herself flat against the ground, her eyes darting to him for instructions. Alex could hear the enemy soldiers' footsteps growing louder, the sound of their movement reverberating off the walls. They were coming straight toward them, unaware of their presence, but it wouldn't be long before they turned the corner. Izra's breathing had quickened, but she didn't speak. Her hand rested on the hilt of her blade, an instinctive reaction. Despite the fact that she was in no condition to fight, Alex could see the fire in her eyes. She was ready to die if it meant protecting him or completing her mission. It was that same warrior mentality that relentless drive to never back down. But Alex wasn't ready to let her die, not like this, not when they were so close. He moved silently, shifting his position to get a better angle. His mind raced as he thought of their options. They couldn't fight their way out. He didn't have the resources for a full-scale confrontation. They needed a distraction, something that could give them the edge. "Stay low," Alex whispered, his hand on his rifle. "I'm going to create a diversion." Before Izara could respond, Alex quickly crawled toward a stack of abandoned crates. With one swift motion, he pulled a grenade from his belt and activated it, tossing it far enough to create a loud explosion in the distance. The blast rang out, shaking the ground beneath them, and Alex used the noise to cover their movement. "Now," Alex said urgently, motioning for Izara to follow. "We move." They darted from cover, staying low to the ground as they made their way through the alleyway. The enemy soldiers, distracted by the explosion, were no longer paying attention to the two figures sneaking past them. Alex's heart raced, but he couldn't afford to slow down. Every second counted. The commotion behind them grew louder as the enemy scrambled to investigate the explosion. But it didn't take long before Alex could hear their voices again closer. This time, the enemy was starting to realize they had been tricked. And it wouldn't be long before they figured out where Alex and Izara were hiding. "We need to move faster," Izara muttered, her voice laced with pain as she struggled to keep up with Alex's hurried pace. Her legs were in bad shape, but she was pushing herself to keep going. Alex could see the strain on her face, the sweat pouring down her forehead. He didn't have to say anything. They both knew they had only one chance to escape. As they neared the communications station, Alex could feel the tension in the air. The building was just ahead, but the sounds of enemy pursuit were getting closer. They were running out of time. A sudden shot rang out, the bullet missing Alex by inches. He ducked instinctively, pulling Izara down behind a concrete pillar for cover. The enemy was close to close. "We can't stop now," Alex said through gritted teeth. "We'll make it. I won't let them take us." Izara nodded, her determination matching his own. The time for hesitation was over. They were going to fight for their survival, for their chance at freedom. With one final burst of energy, Alex and Izara charged toward the entrance of the communications station. The door was in sight, but so were the enemy soldiers who had just turned the corner. Guns raised, ready to fire. Alex's heart raced as he pulled the trigger of his rifle. The shot rang out, and the enemy soldier closest to him dropped to the ground, his weapon falling from his hands. There was no turning back now. The communications station loomed before them, a fortress of metal and stone that seemed to stand untouched by the devastation surrounding it. But even as Alex and Izara neared the entrance, a new, more pressing danger weighed heavily on them. The sounds of pursuit had grown louder, the enemy soldiers closing in with every passing second. Their chance to get inside was slipping away. Alex's hand gripped his rifle tightly, his knuckles white. He could hear the enemy shouting, their voices filled with urgency as they realized they had almost caught up with him and Izara. Time was running out. The door to the communications station was still locked, and there was no way to force it open quietly. If they tried, they would be caught in seconds. He glanced down at Izara, her face drawn with pain, but still burning with that unyielding warrior spirit. She didn't need to speak for him to know what was going through her mind. She was ready to fight, ready to face whatever came next. But Alex wasn't sure they had enough left in them to make it through another battle. "We're almost there," Alex muttered under his breath, though the words lacked conviction. Every step felt heavier, like the world was pushing against them. They couldn't afford to slow down, but they couldn't move any faster either. Isra's injuries were taking their toll, and Alex was running on fumes. The adrenaline from their previous escape starting to fade. But just as the enemy soldiers' footsteps grew louder, a figure emerged from the shadows, moving silently between the ruined buildings. Alex's heart skipped a beat. Another enemy soldier, a scout. He tensed, ready to react. But this figure wasn't wearing the familiar uniform of the alien forces. Instead, they wore tattered but functional combat gear, their face obscured by a helmet with strange markings. Before Alex could raise his rifle, the figure moved quickly, a blur of motion, and before he knew it, the soldier was standing beside them, his weapon lowered. "Move," the figure said in a gruff voice. It was not a suggestion. It was an order. Izara tensed, her hand instinctively going for her blade. But the figure's presence was too commanding, too sudden. Alex could see the hesitation in her eyes. But there was something else, a flicker of recognition. Maybe. The stranger's helmet was scratched, worn, but there was no mistaking the look in his eyes. He was no ordinary soldier. Alex's instincts kicked in, but he was too tired to make any snap judgments. "Who are you?" he asked, his voice filled with suspicion, but also desperation. The figure didn't answer at first. Instead, he glanced at Izara, then back at Alex. "I'm not here to fight you," the figure said, his voice quiet but firm. "But if you're smart, you'll trust me." The words hit Alex like a wave, leaving him with 1,000 questions. Trust. In a war like this, trust was a luxury he couldn't afford. And yet, as he looked at the stranger, something told him that this wasn't a chance encounter. This man, this soldier, had been waiting for them. "I've been watching," the soldier continued, his voice steady. "I saw you both in the outpost. You shouldn't have helped her, Marine. But now, you're both on a path no one can walk alone. I've got a plan, but you need to move now." Alex hesitated, his mind racing. The enemy was close. He could hear them now, shouting commands, looking for them. His heart was pounding in his chest, and he couldn't afford to waste any time. The communication station was within reach, but the enemy had them surrounded. "Who are you?" Izara asked. Her voice strained but sharp. She didn't trust this man, and Alex understood why. He had no reason to either. But the enemy was coming, and they had no choice but to follow his lead for now. The figure's head tilted slightly, as if considering the question. Then he shrugged. "Doesn't matter right now. What matters is that I know where the real threat is, the one who ordered the attack on your people, Marine. The one who left her to die." Alex's eyes narrowed. He hadn't expected this. The alien warrior, Izara, had been betrayed by her own people, and now this stranger seemed to know more about that betrayal than anyone else. Was he a friend, or another enemy? "I'm not sure I believe you," Alex said, but his voice betrayed his doubt. "You don't have to," the soldier replied, his voice unshaken. "But you'll follow me if you want to make it out alive." The urgency in his tone left no room for argument. Alex glanced at Izara. Her expression was unreadable, but Alex could see the conflict in her eyes. She wanted to trust him, but her loyalty to her people, her warriors, ran deep. But then, something shifted in her gaze. She seemed to recognize something in the soldier, a common purpose. "I'm willing to listen," Izara said, her voice low but firm. "But if you betray us, I won't," the soldier interrupted, his voice unwavering. "Not if you can help me take down the real enemy. We have a chance to change the course of this war, but we don't have much time." The words hung in the air, heavy with the weight of what they meant. Alex knew the risks, but this was their only shot. They didn't have the luxury of playing it safe anymore. With one last glance at the communications station, Alex made his decision. They were out of options. They had no choice but to trust this unexpected ally. "Lead the way," Alex said, his voice resolute. The soldier nodded once, then turned, disappearing into the shadows, with Alex and Izara following closely behind. They were entering a new phase of their mission, one that was fraught with danger, but also with the promise of something bigger, a chance to turn the tide as they moved through the crumbling buildings. The sound of the enemy's footsteps faded into the distance. For the first time since the battle began, Alex felt a flicker of hope, but it was a fragile hope. And in a war like this, hope could be as dangerous as any weapon. The journey through the ruins felt like an eternity. The soldier who still hadn't revealed his name led them through narrow alleys, past crumbled buildings, and under the shadow of destroyed vehicles. His steps were quick and quiet, the kind of movement born from years of experience in war. Alex and Izara followed closely, trying to stay hidden, but the tension between them and their guide was palpable. They had no idea who this man truly was, nor why he seemed so sure of their chances, but there was no time to question it now. They had to survive. Alex glanced over at Izara, who was moving slower than usual. The injuries on her legs were worsening, and her breaths were shallow, but she never complained. It was clear she was a warrior, through and through. Her body was battered, but her spirit still burned fiercely. Every step she took was an act of sheer will, a defiance against the pain that was threatening to consume her. "We're almost there," the soldier said suddenly, his voice breaking the silence. They had been walking for what seemed like hours, but in truth, they were only a few miles away from their destination. A hidden bunker that the soldier claimed would offer them the protection they needed to regroup. Alex nodded, his hand gripping his rifle tightly. He kept his senses alert, but it felt like the world around them had shifted. They were no longer running for their lives from the unknown. They were heading into the heart of the enemy's domain. "Who's after us?" Alex asked, his voice low, trying to hide the frustration that had been building up inside him. He had a lot of questions, but for now, survival was the priority. The enemy could be closing in from any direction, and he couldn't afford to be distracted by uncertainties. The soldier's face remained hidden beneath his helmet, but his answer was direct. "The real enemy isn't the soldiers you've been fighting. It's the one pulling the strings. The warlord who controls everything. He's the one who ordered the attack on your base. He's the one who left Izara behind." Alex's stomach tightened. A warlord. It was one thing to fight against an army, but to face a single figure who controlled it all. That was an entirely different beast. It meant that every move Alex had made so far had been in the shadow of something far bigger, far more dangerous. "He's here?" Izara asked, her voice steady but laced with fury. "On this planet?" The soldier nodded. "He's using this war to expand his reach. The destruction you've seen, the deaths of countless innocents, it's all part of his plan. And now? He's after you, Izara. He wants you dead. He wants to make an example of you." Izra's eyes burned with anger, but it was tempered by something else, something cold. This wasn't just about survival anymore, it was personal. She had been betrayed by her people, but now her true enemy had been revealed. The warlord was the one who had started this chain of destruction, the one who had left her to die. "You're sure we can take him down?" Alex asked, his voice laced with doubt. His mind raced with strategies, scenarios, how they could possibly defeat someone like that. A warlord with unlimited resources. It didn't seem possible. The soldier turned and looked at Alex, his face stern beneath the helmet. We don't have much of a choice. We can't just let him continue this war. But if we're going to defeat him, we need to be smart. And we need to make our stand now, before he realizes we're coming. They reached the bunker's entrance, a steel door set into the side of a cliff. The soldier quickly punched in a series of codes on a hidden panel, and with a soft hiss, the door slid open. Inside, the air was cold and sterile, a stark contrast. To the heat and chaos outside, Alex stepped inside first, his rifle raised. Izara followed, her movements slow but determined. The soldier entered last, and as the door closed behind them, a sense of finality settled over them. There was no turning back now. Inside the bunker, it was clear that they were in enemy territory. The walls were lined with equipment, monitors flashing with information Alex didn't understand. This was the nerve center of the war, and it felt like they had just stepped into the lion's den. But there was no fear in the soldier's eyes. He moved with purpose, heading toward a central terminal. "We've got one shot at this," the soldier said, his voice now full of quiet resolve. "This terminal has access to everything. Troop movements, communication networks, supply chains. If we can shut it down, we disrupt the warlord's operations. It'll give us a chance." Alex's mind was spinning. The warlord's forces were powerful, but this was an opportunity. He didn't know if they could win, but it was the only chance they had. The room hummed with energy, the buzz of electronics filling the silence. But even as they prepared to make their move, Alex felt a gnawing sense of unease. It wasn't just about hacking into a terminal. The warlord would have eyes everywhere. If they weren't careful, they would walk right into a trap. "We do this fast," Alex said, taking position near the door. He could feel the tension in his body, the anticipation of the fight to come. This was it, their final stand. The soldier nodded, tapping a few keys on the terminal. "I'm starting the shutdown process now. It'll take a few minutes. We need to hold them off until then." Alex's grip tightened on his rifle. "We'll hold them off." Just as the soldier activated the system, the distant sound of boots echoed through the corridor. The enemy had found them. The moment of truth had arrived. With a glance, Alex and Isora shared a brief but meaningful look. No words were necessary. This was their fight now. And no matter what happened, they would give everything they had to stop the warlord from winning. The bunker had come alive with noise, the sound of alarms blaring in the distance. Alex stood at the entrance, rifle at the ready, his heart pounding in his chest as the countdown on the terminal ticked down. Every second felt like an eternity. Outside, the enemy was closing in, their heavy boots echoing down the corridors. Signaling the start of the final battle, behind him, Izara was pacing, her movements slow but determined. Despite her injuries, her warrior instincts had kicked in. She wasn't going to just lie down and wait for death to come knocking. She had a debt to settle, one that could only be paid in blood. "I've got it." The soldier's voice broke through Alex's focus, his fingers flying over the terminals. "Keys. The system is down. The warlord's operations are disrupted." Alex nodded, though the relief was fleeting. It was one victory, but the war wasn't over. If anything, it had just begun. The enemy would be furious, and they wouldn't stop until they had hunted them all down. "We don't have much time," Alex said, glancing over his shoulder at Isara. "We need to move now." Izara didn't hesitate. She was already at his side, her hand on the hilt of her blade, her eyes sharp and focused. It was as though the pain from her injuries had disappeared, replaced by a singular, unyielding purpose. The warrior spirit within her had fully awakened. The soldier, now standing next to the terminal, nodded. "I'll stay here and hold them off. You two need to get out. Not happening, Alex replied quickly, his eyes narrowing. We're in this together. We survive together. The soldier's helmet tilted slightly, a gesture that might have been a smile. Then it settled. We fight together. But, make no mistake, he added, his voice dropping to a low growl. This is our last chance. If we fail, everything we fought for will be lost. Alex exchanged a glance with Isara. Her lips were set in a firm line, and she nodded, her jaw clenched with determination. This wasn't just about survival anymore. This was about reclaiming their freedom, about standing against the warlord who had caused so much pain. Not just for them, but for countless others. Together, they moved through the dark corridors. The sounds of enemy soldiers growing louder as they approached. The soldier led the way, his movements swift and precise. They were no longer following orders. They were making their own path, one forged in the heat of battle and driven by the promise of a better future. Alex could feel the weight of their decision pressing down on him. They had chosen to fight, not just for themselves, but for something bigger, for the chance to end the war, for the chance to give those who had suffered a chance at peace. The air was thick with the smell of burning metal and dust, the remnants of the destruction they had caused as they turned a corner. They were met with the sight of a group of enemy soldiers, their guns raised. The moment they spotted Alex and Isara, they opened fire. The soldier moved like a shadow, taking out two of them before they even had a chance to react. Alex and Isara sprang into action, working together with a fluidity that came from a shared understanding of what was at stake. Isara moved like a blur, her blade cutting through the air with precision, striking down one soldier after another. Alex's rifle cracked, the shots echoing through the halls, dropping enemies in their tracks. For a brief moment, they seemed unstoppable. Their combined strength and resolve pushing them forward. But even as they fought, the reality of their situation set in. They were surrounded, and reinforcements were closing in fast. This wasn't going to be easy. It was going to be a fight for every inch of ground they gained. Push forward, the soldier shouted, his voice harsh. We can't stay here. We need to get to the control room. With no time to waste, Alex and Isara followed him, barreling through the corridors, taking out anyone who dared to stand in their way. Each step felt like a battle. Each corner they turned another test of their strength, but there was no turning back now. They had made it this far, and they weren't about to fail. Finally, they reached the control room, a large, open space, filled with monitors and equipment. The warlord's forces were already inside, but they hadn't yet activated the station's defenses. Alex could see the enemy soldiers scrambling to prepare for what was coming. The soldier wasted no time. He stormed into the room, his weapon raised, taking out two soldiers before they even had a chance to react. Alex and Isara followed, moving together as a single unit. Their every move calculated, their every strike lethal. The last of the enemy. Soldiers fell, their bodies slumping to the ground in a heap. The room fell silent. Alex stood over one of the fallen soldiers, his breathing heavy, his chest rising and falling with the effort. He glanced at Isara, whose face was a mask of exhaustion, but also triumph. They had done it. They had broken through. But they weren't done yet, not by a long shot. The soldier moved to the central control panel, his hands flying over the keys as he began the shutdown process. The warlord's forces were